This is part of a ham from a whitetail that I killed in the fall. As you can see, it's nothing special. It's pretty much straight off the deer. Ham, people don't use much for anything other than grinding, but we're going to try to do something different with it here and put it in the sous vide. Yeah, so after drying it out, then you just basically cut off any of the stuff you don't want, any of the silver skin. Not that it makes a huge difference, but if you are picky about it, which some people are, just take it off and kind of just peel it like that, which is easy to do. Some of it I'll leave on, but it's just personal preference. Before I put it in a plastic bag to get ready for the sous vide, I'm just gonna season it. Probably just salt and pepper, just normal sea salt. Put a pretty heavy coating on there because once it's sliced, that outside bit is the only portion that's gonna have any seasoning on it. So pretty liberally there, and then pepper. A lot of the flavor we're going to get in there is going to be from the other fixings. We kind of just want this to taste like what it is. Looks like a lot, but if you don't get it really seasoned up nice, then you're not going to barely taste it at all, because if you look at it when you slice it, you're getting barely any seasoning except for the end pieces. So that outer crust is super important, and I'll probably do it again once it's all done in the sous vide. From here, it's nothing special, just put it in the bag and seal it up. So you fill a pot of water, about 3/4 of the way, or enough so it's going to cover the meat once it goes in there. Get your sous vide set.
Alright everybody, I'm going to go ahead and voice this part over right here because the sound of the sous vide machine was so loud that it was picked up in 15 different states, 4 Canadian provinces, and I now have an appointment with my audiologist tomorrow. But what he did was set the temperature to 125 degrees, set the timer to an hour, hour and a half, to 2 hours, and then that way when we do the outside sear towards the end, it'll be nice and cooked.
To 125 for 2 hours. We'll start it and wait for it to get up to temp. Once it gets up to temp, then just drop your meat in. However, I like to put my meat in now because the water's not as hot, so it's easier to get like a complete vacuum seal on that meat. So what I do is I take this meat and I push it in there until we're about at the top, and if you have a little pocket here, if you have a little pocket of air, it quickly gets sucked out as you put that underwater, and then once it's almost all the way underwater, you seal it up, and as you can see, pretty nicely sealed in there. So just drop it down and clip it on the side there. Alright, so once you have it in there, it's set to time. It'll beep when you're done, otherwise set a timer on your phone, and once that comes up temp, then you take the next step. But it's important that you leave it in there for at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on what you like. The longer you leave it in there, it's not going to do anything to it, but you do need it to cook up to temp.
Alright, what we did right there is we're driving to our known ramp spot. What Sam doesn't know is that I have a spot marked out on OnX. So I'm making him blindly go through everything to find them when really I'm leading him straight to it. One of the great things about ramps and foraging in general is that you don't have to hike too deep into public land or get into some spot that's way out in the boonies, it's excellent because you can just come out here in an urban setting like this. And I mean, camera won't show you so we don't spoil this spot, but we're about 100 yards maybe from the nearest house. So for reference, this is what they look like in the ground. You can usually find them in patches.
You know, because it tastes good. Tastes like a weaker onion, or maybe like with a little bit of garlic in there. You want them to be all intact. If you think about when you have a green onion, you really like that, you know, the bulb of it, so to speak. So I just kind of put my finger in by the stem and try to get below it. And you just pop them out like that. Shake them off. Clean. You can clean them off at home after, but you don't want them to be all smashed up because then the dirt gets in there and it's really hard to wash out.
You can generally characterize ramps by the large green leaves when you spot them before you pick them, and they usually grow in large patches and bunches.
When people look at these things, they don't really know what they're looking at and they second guess themselves, just like I was. It's my first time picking them this season, but if you know that they're gonna smell just like an onion, it doesn't really, you know, takes all the guesswork out of it.
Be sure to be super mindful of how much you're taking and not to take too much. If you can, try and cut at the root while you're pulling them out to leave that in there to help them grow back faster. And also try not to overpick a spot too hard, that way there's plenty. Typically with ramps, you'll usually find them close to sources of water, so be careful. You might run yourself into a little neighbor there, so be mindful while you're picking them. Alright everybody, I'm here voicing over again because Mr. Sam decided to leave the sink on, which was also deafening and can't really hear him over it. So what he's saying here is to take the ham out of the sous vide, go ahead and dry it out, that way it cooks really nicely, because if you leave it too wet it can in essence kind of boil the meat, but you also don't want to dry it too hard, you know, that way it's not so dry in the pan.
Alright, so first kind of rinse off the ramps in the sink, get all the dirt off them generally. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect as you can see, but you peel back one layer and all the dirt's gone, and that's good enough. What I do is I separate them. I'll go from these stems. Stem ends about here. Take it, chop it, there. That's where most of the flavor is, but these leaves got some good stuff too. You make salads and stuff like that with them. So I'll leave those in a pile of their own. You can saute them just like spinach or something, or whatever you want with them really. So I'll just continue with that process until I'm done with them all. Keep the leaves in a separate bag and wash it like you do salad when you come to eat that. Alright, I got a half cup of water here. Put this into a little pot thing. Alright, I'm going to do a quarter cup of white vinegar. Pour that in. Then a quarter cup of apple cider vinegar. And then you're going to add a tablespoon of fine sea salt. 1.5 tablespoons of honey. Then you put in some red pepper flakes, just however spicy you like it. It's about good for me. Alright, so after you get everything in there, you bring that up to a simmer. Once you get that together, it looks like it's pretty good here. At least about to a simmer. Shut this off, and then you're going to take your can with all the ramps in there, cut up a little bit, you know, different sizes but mostly smaller, and pour this mixture over it. Alright, so now that everything's submerged in there, pretty good, let that cool for about 30 minutes until it gets to about room temp, and that's going to pickle all those ramps in there really nice and impart that flavor into them. This is the quick pickling method. Alright, and then for the meat, I just preheated the cast iron, threw some olive oil in there. You can really use whatever you want. I got some bear fat in my fridge, but I'm conserving that. So you can use bacon fat, bear fat, vegetable oil, olive oil, avocado oil, anything that has a high smoke point. And as you can see, it's starting to smoke a little bit now. That's how I know it's ready. You don't want to put it in before that because you really just want a hot and fast sear. So because it's ready, I'll show you here what it's going to sound like when you put it in. That's how you know you're getting it good. Leave that on there for maybe a minute and a half. Or when you pick it up, and you know that puppy's got a nice crisp. Alright, so the crust you're going to want is going to look like this. See how that is? That nice crust on there, that's going to give you the crunch and also the flavor of the caramelized meat that you want. That's just going to be on your outside, so you need to make sure you get it good. Okay, this is the final product here with a nice sear on it, done before sous vide. But if you want, you can do a reverse sear, and that means in the oven real low and slow for about an hour, hour and a half. Alright, toast your bread, mix up some sriracha, mayo, lay your meat on there, however you please. You can use a lot, you can use a little, just whatever you like to do. Start putting avocado on there. Getting hungry as I make it. Alright, take your ramps out of here and just kind of drizzle them across. And act as your acid or pickle sandwich.
Now, Sam, are there any bag limits or restrictions on the foraging?
No, take them all.
May or may not. Found a spot. Sam, what is the best way once you pick one up to identify a ramp? As you pick a ramp spot, Sam, to go looking, what are you looking for in a spot?
First, it depends. I'm looking for mostly stuff. Next, you look at the things. When you have stuff and things together, you know it's probably a good spot. Say you only have stuff, it's hit or miss. You only have things, definitely not. So you kind of play it by ear, but overall you're just looking for stuff and then things with it.